Hello everyone and welcome to the Knowledge Pool, your source for everything regarding the rules of Magic the Gathering. Today we'll be going over all of the legendary creatures of the new set of Magic the Gathering Streets of New Capenna, and we'll be covering the basic rulings you need to know about the main set commanders, which are 19 of them, 4 monocolored and 15 which are 3 colors, 1 common, 1 rare and 1 mythic for each family. Let's begin with the monocolored ones. Starting off with mono white, we have Giada, Font of Hope. It's a legendary creature angel, 1 and a white for a 2/2 flying vigilance. Every other angel you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it for each angel you already control, and it could tap for white, and you can use all that mana only to cast an angel spell. So one thing you need to know here, obviously angel spell is everything that has the subtype angel, and also all changelings are inherently angels because their ability functions everywhere. Secondly, if you play a card like a 3D angels that boosts multiple angels into play at the same time, they all will get counters based on the number of angels you already have on the field. So this is a mono white angel tribal deck, pretty simple card to understand. Next up we have a bull commander of the set, which is Errant, Street Artist. It's a legendary creature human rock for 1 blue and it's a 0/3, has flash, defender and haste, which are weird keywords on a card, and it has the ability for 1 and a blue and tap it, copy and spell you control that wasn't cast, and you may choose new targets for it. Interesting things to note here for the ability. You can copy any spell, not just instant and sorceries, and the spell needed to not be cast. So the first things that come to mind here are copy effects like Reverberate. Those things work, so essentially you cast a Reverberate, you copy, let's say, a spell you already had on the stack, and you can use Errant to copy it again. We need to be careful here because not all copy effects work with it. For example, Isochron Scepter actually casts the copy, and even though the spell is not a original spell, it's a copy, you still get to cast it, so Errant cannot copy spells from Isochron Scepter, so no extra infinite mana here. But as I mentioned, you can copy any spell, so if you use like Lithoform Engine and copy creature, you can actually use Errant to make another copy of the creature, and that makes Errant a great include in Volo Guide to Monsters, because you can essentially make 3 creatures per creature you don't already have on your field graveyard, which is pretty neat. Also, there is definitely a way you can go infinite. You need the mana rock that gives you at least 3 mana like Gilded Lotus, the famous usually going infinite card which is Ghostly Flicker, and a way to copy that Ghostly Flicker with like Innervate or Reverberate, and then you flash in Errant. You can copy the copied Ghostly Flicker, you flicker Errant and you get it Lotus, and you are where you were before but +1 mana, so you can make infinite blue mana this way. Next up we have Jaxis, the Troublemaker. It's a legendary creature human warrior, 3 and a red for a 2/3 that has Blitz for 1/2. I already covered the set mechanics in a separate video which you can check here and in the description below. And the other ability is that you can pay red, tap him, discard the card and make a creature token that's a copy of another target creature you control, and it gains the Blitz ability which is haste, and when it dies you draw a card and that you have to sacrifice it. So 2 things here. First, the Blitz cost can be used to cast from the command zone, so you can pay the Blitz cost and the normal cost, but it gains haste. When it dies you draw a card and you get to sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. Also, if you have already cast Jaxis either way and then you try to recast him again from the command zone, if you choose the Blitz cost, it also gets increased by 2 because it's an alternative cost and the commander tax applies as normal. So you essentially can cast always Jaxis from the command zone for 2 less mana if you want to keep him around only for 1 turn. And important thing again here, obviously you make a token, so anything that will trigger of making tokens so that you're allowed to create more tokens is good here. It's sort of the Kiki-Jiki effect, that you have to sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. The thing is, you can only use the ability as a sorcerer, so you cannot do tricky things like wait for your opponent's end step in order to use it again. Important things also here, if you cast him with Blitz from the command zone, it still goes to the graveyard, so you get to draw a card. Either if it dies before the Blitz trigger, or if it dies at the beginning of the next end. And for the final monocolored card of the main set, we have Urabrask Heretic Praetor. It's a legendary creature, 3x Praetor, 4/4 for a 3 and double red haste. At the beginning of your upkeep, you exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn. And at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, the next time they would draw a card this turn, they instead exile that card and they may play that card instead. So a little bit of confusion about this card, let's break it down real quick. During your upkeep you get to impulse draw essentially, so you exile the top card of your library and you may play it this turn, otherwise it makes an exile and you lose it. So if you exile a land this way and you play the land, you cannot play another land from your hand unless you have an effect that gives you additional land drops. And for the second ability, this is where the people got confused. It essentially replaces the first draw they would make during their turn only by exiling that card to be able to play it only that turn essentially. So if they exile a counterspell, for example, it's useless unless they plan to use it on their turn. If they exile land, they have to play the land, and if they want to keep it, otherwise they have to play a land from the hand. And if it exiles something that they could normally play, they are just limited to playing it during that turn. So it's essentially prisons that draw they would make during that turn for that turn only. It's kind of like Urabrask, but worse because Urabrask restricts every draw they make. This only just restricts the first card draw they make. So it's in line with the Praetor theme, which is you get something and your opponent gets either half of it or loses that something. Like the previous Urabrask granted everything haste and make them opponent creatures and the battlefield tapped. So if you use it with an effect like Druid Magister in a Boros deck, you can lock them out of the draw step, the card draw at least for the first turn. Otherwise it's kind of pretty underwhelming. Now for the multicolored cards of the set, we're gonna start with the uncommons for each family. And up first we have the Maestros with Cormela, Glamour Thief. It's a 1 and Grixis for a 2/4 legendary vampire rogue. It has haste, has a mana ability that reads 1 generic and tap it, add Grixis, and you can spend this mana to cast instant sorceries. And when it dies, you return up to 1 target instant sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. So essentially what this is, it's a mana dark that locks you into casting instant sorcery with her ability, and you get on death to rebuy something from the graveyard. This has also many ways to go infinite. Essentially if you have 3x and altar and the reanimating hand, you can keep reanimating him back because you tap him for the Grixis part, then you sacrifice her to the 3x and altar, you trigger to get an instant back, you have 1 black from the 3x and altar and Grixis you pull, use the Grixis that restricts you all your instant sources to cast the reanimate, bring him back, has haste, and you can essentially generate infinite mana that way, or at least as much life as you have because you lose life with the reanimate. But if you have an effect to also gain life like Aetherflux Reservoir, you can go infinite and win that way. Next up is the Brokers one or the band one, which is Lagrella, the Magpie. It's a band colors for a 2/3 legendary creature human soldier and the most confusing text ever. When it enters the battlefield, exile any number of other target creatures controlled by different players until she leaves the battlefield. And when an exiled card enters the battlefield as you control this way, put +2 counters on it. So what this does essentially is that for each player you can exile 1 creature they have. And because it says any number, you can choose from 1 to 4 if you're playing commander games essentially. Then when she leaves, you return the creatures back, obviously under the controller's board because it doesn't say anything else. And any creatures that enter the battlefield this way that were yours get 2 counters on them. So what this does essentially is allow you to, if someone has stolen your creatures, get them back bigger, or if you are on a flicker strategy like a rune deck, you can use it like a field hunter but getting also a bonus on your creatures. Next up we have the Repeteers one or the Jund one. It's Mr. Orfeo the Boulder, 2/4 legendary creature Rhino Warrior for 1 and the Jund colors, and pretty simple. Whenever you attack, double target creature power at the end of turn. Reminder, whenever you attack a player replaces Augur with 1 or more creatures, so it only triggers once for your attacks, it does not trigger multiple times. The doubling targets, so you have to be careful if you have a creature with Shroud, that's equipped with Lightning Greaves for example, or a creature has protection from the Jund colors, you cannot target him with Orfeo the Boulder. Also, a note on doubling creatures power, we take essentially any plus and minuses and counters on them, and we count how much power is at that point, the ability resolving, and then we add that much power. So doubling is essentially you count how much you have and you add that much more. Next up we have the Obscura one or the Esper one. It's Queza, Augur of Agonies for 1 and Esper, 3/4 legendary creature Cephalid Advisor, with the text that whenever you draw a card, target opponent lose 1 life and you gain 1 life. So important things here. This triggers 1 for each card you draw, so an effect that says draw 3 cards, for example like Brainstorm, it's essentially draw 1, draw 1, draw 1. So if you play Brainstorm for example, this triggers 3 times and you get to pick whenever opponent you want for its trigger. Also, this has a very nice infinite combo you can do if you are playing Lich's Mastery, which says among its other text that whenever you gain life you also draw that many cards. You can essentially draw your whole deck, because you draw a card, gain life, and you cannot stop it essentially, so you will mill out, but also Lich's Mastery says you cannot lose the game, so it will immediately end itself when you have no way to draw cards. At that point I assume you will give either 1 or 2 opponents, and I think you know what to do, you have your whole library in your hand. And for the final card, it's the Cabaretti or the Naya uncommon legendary Rocco Cabaretti Caterer. It's a legendary creature elf druid for 3/1, and the mana cost is Naya and X. And when he enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you may search your library for a creature card with mana value X or less and put it into the battlefield, then shuffle. So obviously here, if you have a Bar Harmonico now, this will trigger twice, because it's an ETB trigger. This is a very easy food chain commander if you're gonna go that route, because in order for you to play food chain, you need at least green in your deck and then either red or blue most of the times. The good thing about this card is you can get you one of the pieces for the food chain, so that's either Squee or Eternal Skirts. And also if you play a creature combo in your deck like Kiki-Jiki and Village Berserker or Zealous Conscripts, after you make infinite mana with food chain, because it's restricted to creatures only, you can tutor them out also. So I expect this card to be very popular. So now we continue with the rare legendary creatures of the set, which all have the same pattern. They have essentially 1 pip of the color of the family centered around and a hybrid for the other 2 colors. So let's get out of the way immediately. These can only be used in the decks that have at least those 3 colors, even though hybrid is meant to work differently. In Commander it works like this is a 3-color card. So we begin with Evelyn the Covetous. He's a 2 and the weird Grixis symbols for a legendary creature vampire rogue, 2/5 Lash. When it enters the battlefield or another vampire enters the battlefield under control, we exile the top card of its player's library with the collection counter on it. And once it's turn, we may play a card from exile with a collection counter on it. And if it goes exiled, only from an ability we control. And we may spend mana as though it was mana of any color to cast it. So the weirdness there for if it goes exiled with an ability we control is because someone else could play an Evelyn and there will be multiple cards in exile with collection counters, and we need to keep separate track of them, because in case you didn't know, exile is a search zone, that's why they have to specify it that way. Also here, pretty obvious, since it's a play card, we can play lands, but we can do so only on our turn. And for being able to cast at other people's turns, we essentially can cast only instant as way or creatures with flash. And obviously, if we have a way to give everything flash, we can cast anything we want, but only one card each turn. And also, if we have a way to flicker a vampire infinite times, we get to exile all cards of our opponent's libraries. Also, we obviously need to have Evelyn on the battlefield in order for us to be able to cast the cards with a collection of others on them, because she gives the ability for the collection cards to be cast. Next up we have Jinnie, Jetmir second, the weird Naya combination for the mana cost, 3/3 legendary creature elf druid with a simple text. If you would create one or more tokens, you may instead create that many 2/2 green cat creature tokens with haste or that many 3/1 dog creatures with vigilance. So pretty simple here. You essentially get to upgrade your tokens into either 2/2s or 3/1s. An important thing to mention here is that you have to choose to replace all of the effect with one of the two options. So for example, if you play a card that may allow you to create 3 tokens, you cannot choose to make 1 cat and 2 dogs, you have to make either 3 cats or 3 dogs. And it works also with all the other extra token creators like Parallel Lives and Anointed Possession, as you would expect. You get either double guts or double dogs, you cannot differentiate between the effects. So pretty simple card, you play a bunch of token creators and you're set. Next up we have Ognis, the Dragon Lash. Is the Riveteer card, so it's 1 and the weird chant colors. Legendary creature via Sin Warrior 3/3 haste, and whenever a creature you control with haste attacks, create a tapped treasure token. So treasure tokens are obviously essentially the tokens that just you have to tap them and sacrifice them to add mana. So here you cannot get the mana immediately. Also, this ability triggers once for every creature you attack that has haste. And the haste doesn't have to be inherited on the creature. You can use effects like Hysteria or Crowdar Crossroads, who gives everything haste and you get multiple treasures. They have made the treasures at the top, so you cannot go infinite very easily with cards like Aggravated Assault that allows you to attack multiple times. And you can essentially make a deck that makes a lot of artifacts and takes advantage of the artifact triggers. And you need a lot of small creatures or creatures with haste to have this card work as intended. We continue with the Broker's legendary, or the band legendary is Rigo, Streetwise Mentor, for the band weird color combination. Legendary creature cut seeds and 2/2. He enters the battlefield with a shield counter. I have already covered shield counters in the mechanics video, but essentially what shield counter does, it prevents one-time destruction, or the first time will be the damage. And whenever you attack a player with or planeswalker with 1 or more creatures you control with power 1 or less, draw a card. So the wording is a bit weird here. The reason it is worded that way is because you get to draw for attacking planeswalkers and players. So let's say you're playing in a 4-player game and you attack one opponent with a creature with power 1 or less, you get to draw 3 cards because the ability triggers per player and per planeswalker. And even in a 1v1 game that your opponent has, let's say, 3 planeswalkers, if you attack with 4 creatures, 1 attacking the player and 3 attacking the planeswalkers, you get to draw 4 cards because of the weird wording here. So it's a good idea to spread your attacks, and you also get to get advantage of opponent's planeswalkers, but you have to attack with creatures that have power 1 or less at the point they're attacking. You can decrease the power later. And the final rare legendary is Tolus, Clever Conductor. It's the Esperor Obscura mana cost, 3/1 for a legendary creature human rogue. When it enters the battlefield, it connives. I have already covered the mechanic, but connive is essentially you draw this card, and if you discarded something that wasn't allowed, you put a counter on here. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, you exile them from the graveyard, and when it dies, you put the cards exiled with it into their owner's hands. So essentially, the connive, you can choose to exile the card with his second ability. The second ability is a triggered ability here, so the card will go to the graveyard and will then leave, so it works with creatures as an Conrad. And the final ability is only on death, so you need to be very careful, because if it gets exiled, in a way, you will essentially not have access to the cards you have exiled here anymore. Also, if you choose to flicker it, because when it comes again to the battlefield, it's a new object and doesn't remember the cards it exiled before, you will lose the cards. So essentially, you can play a deck that has a lot of wheeling effects, and then you can sacrifice here and get the cards back and have a lot of cards in your hand. And finally, there are the mythic legendary creatures of the set, which are the family leaders. We start with the brokest one, which is Falco, Spara, Packweaver. It's 1 and band colors for a 3-3 legendary creature bear demon, flying and trample. 8 enters the battlefield with a seal counter on it. We already talked about seal counters. You may look at the top card of your library at any time, and you may cast spells from the top of your library by removing counter from a creature you control in addition to paying their costs. So obviously you're not allowed to cast spells off the top, so lands are a no-no with this card. You can always cast at least the first card you see because you have a counter of Falco. This card has a very good potential to go infinite very easily. You essentially need a Senses Defining Top and a way to repeatedly get counters to your creatures. One easy way is Devoted Druid. So you can tap Devoted Druid at the green, untap him by putting counter on him to make him a 0-1. Then you tap him again to add another green. You use the ability of Senses Defining Top to put it back on top. You draw a card, then you cast a card by removing the counter from Druid, and you can keep going that way and essentially having infinite green mana in your mana pool, or not quite infinite, as much as you can draw from your deck. Then another combo is you can use a persist creature in those colors like Kitchen Fix and the Phyrexian Altar, and you can again generate infinite mana. So this is a value based commander, it's very easy to go infinite, and you have blue, so you know what to do with no cards in your library. Up next, it's the Naya family leader, or the Cabaretti family leader, Jetmir next to Rebels, 1 and Naya colors for a 5-4. As their creature cat demon. Creatures you control get +1, +0 and have vigilance as long as you have 3 or more creatures. They get +1 and +0 and trample as you have 6 or more creatures. And they get +1 and +0 and double strike as long as you have 9 or more creatures. So very quick here, those creatures count themselves, so essentially when you have Jetmir out, those numbers become 2, 5 and 8, and the effects are cumulative, so if you have 9 creatures on the board, they get +3, +0, vigilance, trample and double strike. So you essentially make a go white tokens deck and get advantage of all the benefits Jetmir provides. Next, it's the Maestro's family leader, Lozander the Collector, 4 and Grixis colors for a 6/6 legendary creature vampire demon noble. When that's the battlefield, you choose an opponent, you target the opponent and discard the cards that have rounded down, half of them. When it attacks, defending player mills half of the library rounded down. And when it dies, target opponent sacrifice half the low permanents they control rounded down. So pretty straightforward here. The ETB makes them lose half their hand, the attack makes him mill half the deck, and on death he forces player to discard, to sacrifice the permanents. They own half of them. Note that because the mill is rounded down, you can necessarily never mill them completely if they have an odd number cards remaining in their deck. But I think the most useful part of this card is the ETB and the dice trigger, because those can be manipulated way more easily than the attack trigger, and they can be pretty powerful. But again, note, they can never have essentially 0 cards, because if you choose an opponent for the first ability that has 1 card in hand, rounded down, half of the 1 is 0, so they would discard 0. So if they have 1 in any zone, the abilities do nothing. Next is the Obscura leader, which is Raffine's Scheming Sea, a 1/4 legendary creature Sphinx Demon for the Esper colors, flying a ward 1, and whenever you attack, target attacking creature connives X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. And when you connive X, you get to draw X card and discard X card, so you do it all at once, not one at a time. And for each card that was not allowed to discard way, the creature you chose gets +1/+1. So a reminder, ward 1 means that whenever Raffine will become a target of spell ability, the opponent has a chance to pay 1 generic mana, or that spell ability becomes countered. Another note here is that whenever you attack, you choose a creature, and because the ability targets, if they kill the creature in response, you don't get to connive. Also, it's pretty interesting that this is not a defined connive card, so if you attack, for example, 5 creatures, you get to draw 5, discard 5, and then put some counters. Pretty interesting, maybe as a commander a little bit underwhelming, I would say. And finally, we end the legendary creatures of the set with the obligatory big dragon fit set. So we have Zaitora, the Incinerator. It's a legendary demon dragon, 6/6 for 3 enchant colors, flying, and at the beginning of your end step you may sacrifice another creature. When you do, it deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target, and you create 3 treasure tokens. So 2 notes here: even though you deal damage based on the sacrificed creature's power, Zaitora deals the damage, so anything that Zaitora has on it, it will be used here. So for example, if Zaitora has lifelink, you get to gain the life. If Zaitora has death touch and you target a creature, because it says any target, it will die no matter how big the creature is. One spicing thing you can do is equip Zaitora with a graphic exoskeleton, so it gains effect, and if you sacrifice a creature with less than power, you kill someone. Also, if the target for some reason becomes illegal during the resolution of the ability, you don't get to make the treasures. And the most important thing I think here is that these are essentially 2 separate triggers. When you see when you do on a trigger condition like Zaitora, that's what we call a reflexive trigger. So here's what happens during the end step. You say trigger Zaitora, the Incinerator's ability. You wait for the opponents to respond, and you choose to sacrifice a creature. And then the trigger happens to deal the damage. So then there will be a new triggered ability that you have to choose a target for. So you get to put the ability to the stack, and you might choose to sacrifice nothing, which is pretty neat. You can mess up some things. Another easy way to kill people is by sacrificing Lord of Extinction, because he's usually huge in commander games. So you can essentially, if you have a graveyard full of cards, you can deal 40 to someone very easily. Another note here, because I know many, especially new players, are getting confused. The damage Zaitora deals here with her ability is not commander damage, because commander damage has to be combat damage. Also, you get to look at the creature's power toughness as it exists on the battlefield to determine how much damage you would do with Zaitora. And this was a brief rules recap on all the 19 commander creatures from the main set of Streets of Capenna. When Scryfall releases the commander deck creatures and the set booster legendary creatures, I will do a separate video on them specifically. Hope this allows you to get a head start on making some of these commanders your own. Thank you very much for watching the video, hope you enjoyed. See you in the next video.